What up, friends? Friends of YouTube and fighting. I'm back, your boy here. I just got to tell you, at the time we're recording this, I only minutes ago finished our first analysis. We're going to do a few, but our first analysis of Jorge Masvidal versus Stephen Thompson. You will find it just around this YouTube channel. And, the first half hour, I'm talking about it, whatever. By the last 10 minutes, I start getting myself all fucking worked up. Like, literally, my eye was moistening. Like, I didn't quite go Sinead O'Connor like a tear, but it was getting there. So I'm pretty fucking worked up. I'm pretty stoked right now. So here's the quick overview. We have done an early analysis, me and Ramdeen. We've done a couple other small analysis of George St-Pierre versus Michael Bisping. If you're watch my work on TSN, the sports network up here in Canada, in the next few days, there is a 30-minute doc on George's return coming out. I've got 2 essays on George versus Mike coming out on tsn.ca. So there's a lot of stuff going on, and I'll be going to New York next week. However, digging into the fight itself, we're going to scratch the surface a little today, and then we're going to go deeper over the next 10 days. So I'm hoping to do 2, 3 of these from different perspectives. Same with Jorge versus Wonderboy. The first one's up. I got all fucking kinds of worked up for that. I'm fucking pumped for that fight. But I'm pumped for this fight too. I really am. For a lot of different reasons. Every fight means something different, you know? It represents something different. There's something different with the artistry that's going on. There's something different between the individuals. In this one, there's always meaning to the fight. And I'm often most curious about the actual martial artistry. But there's meaning to these men too. And before I dig into that, let me first say that they need to, the things we're going to talk about right now, what this means to them. In many ways, you don't want to be thinking about that if George is elbowing the face or Mike Bisping is punching you against the fence or whatever's going on. That meaning can be a part of you, and it will be a part of you when you walk into that cage, but you don't want to be thinking about belts and fucking, win bonuses and shit when you're fighting an elite athlete. However, all that stuff is there. And in the next day or so, another thing you can watch for, David Mullins, sports psychology consultant, very close friend. We're digging into this fight later on today or tomorrow. So you should be able to see that in the next 24 or 48 hours. So we'll dig into the mentality of both the men and the psychological challenges of this fight. And there are many. There always are. If you watch the stuff here, I've been giving insight and telling stories about the documentary that we've built on George. It's coming out in the next week or so. They've been working on it hard. What that allowed me to do is to get deep insight into what George is doing, what he has been doing, where his head is at, what he's been doing technically, who he's been training with, and what they've been studying. Unique insight. And before I go into this fight, one thing I want to tell you is when you get that, and I have at different times for different fighters, I spent some good time with Doo-Ho Choi just before his fight with Feely got canceled, and with Cobb out in Albuquerque, and there's been lots, and I hope to do lots again because it's an incredible gift. But what it does show you is how little you see before every fight. There's so much going on. There is so much they're doing. There's so much they're learning. There's ways that they're getting better. There's limitations to their body. There's where their mind is really at. I spent an evening with Diego Sanchez for an afternoon and an evening with Diego Sanchez, for example. Dude thinks way different than everybody you know. And I mean that. And it's cool to see. He's an artist, and he's an oddball. George thinks way different, but George has a lot in common with the top of the top of the top in all areas of athletics. So, Michael Jordan or fucking Wayne Gretzky or whoever, they're obsessives. They're truly obsessives. And that's what George is. So let me tell you what we've seen from being embedded with George through this process. I studied George years ago, up until his last fight. I think it was November 15th or 16th of 2014. 13. 2013, right? It's almost 4 years. That's crazy. We've been doing this a long time now. And George never stopped training. That's the thing. That's the thing people don't see. You know, you see some of these guys and like, oh, okay, training camp starts soon. How was camp, bro? For guys like George St-Pierre, there's no camp. There's no training camp. Also, Chael was one of the first ones to say that is such a douchey and dorky term. And it really is. It really is. You don't go to camp. You know, what are you going to have a sleepover? It's a, you know, you shouldn't, for a lot of these top guys, there's no, you know, well, we're back in the gym, we got a fight booked. They're in the gym forever. They're permanently evolving martial artists. Bisping is somewhere on that spectrum closer to that, but he also lives his fucking life. And well, he should. Well, he should. But George is, and I'll be honest with you, and George will say this himself. I'm not talking shit on George. He's a fucking boring dude. He really is. If you ask George, he's like, George, how's your life? Oh, most people think my life is boring, but I love it. George trains twice a day. He studies fighting. He studies martial arts. He studies self-improvement. He studies physicality. He probably has sex sometimes because he likes women. At different times that I've known him, he's had a girlfriend, but when he doesn't, there's always a lot of girls pursuing George St-Pierre. And he eats. And maybe once or twice a week, he likes to go to a nightclub and listen to bad French hip-hop. It's true. All this is true. But most of the time, he's on a quest for permanent self-improvement. That's what he's about. That's who he is. That's why he's the fucking greatest. And that's what's been going on this entire time. So where has George improved? We're going to get into some of these specifics over the next few days. But, and it's a strange one for me. This is a weird one for me. Because I got insight. I was allowed in to see this stuff, and we filmed it. But I also had off-the-record conversations with George. And I don't know, some of them, he may have told me things he wanted me to tell. But then other ones, strategies or things that, you know, Bisping might pick up on his own or not pick up, I don't know. It's strange. So what I can talk to you about is where I've seen huge improvements for him. So first area is not an improvement. It's just a continuation. People, we limit how we talk about things these days, but we will get to a simple conversation. Who's the best athlete in the UFC? Now, we may not know exactly what encompasses a great athlete or how one happens, but if we say George is a better athlete than Bisping, then we've learned something and we're good, we can move on. It's really not that simple. True athletic ability has a ton to do with the nervous system. Something George trains extensively. And something that at the highest level, once your muscle's bigger and you run faster and you jump higher and you lift more, it becomes about the nervous system. So by the time we get back to this conversation, the next one in 4 or 5 days, you will have access to a sit down I'm doing with Dr. Stu McGill, who is the highest level as the spine and the nervous system relates to athletic performance. If you Google Dr. Stu McGill, there ain't no better. And Mark and I are going to go out and see him in a couple of days and sit down. He's worked extensively with George, and he's analyzed how the nervous system expresses in fighters like this. And George is on the highest level of that. If you get to see the documentary, and I'm hoping that it'll be up in its entirety on tsn.ca, I don't know for sure, we go in and we study him with the highest level of people dealing with reaction time and dealing with the eye's ability to register things, their brain's processing speed. All of this is where the elites of the elites are training. And Bisping trains some of these things too, as many do. Some don't talk about it. Some just, and most people don't ask, This motherfucker just said on Twitter that your mom's ugly. What do you say to that? That's what's more often asked. And I've stopped judging that. I don't mean to be rude about it. It's just true. And people don't ask stuff because they don't want to ask another thing. Partly, if that's what an audience is after and that's what sells, your job is to ask things that people want to see. You'll have a smaller audience if you start asking about nervous systems and stuff, but it'll be a true one. It'll be a unique one. And they won't have other places to go for that. But so George has a highly trained nervous system, something we talked about with Floyd Mayweather. It's research that has happened that we're building on. We're going to get a lot more knowledge on that in a couple of days. And once the documentary comes out, you'll see some of these things that George trains. He's big, strong, fast, never been bigger, never been more athletic, never had a higher vertical, never accelerated off the line faster, never changed direction better, never been just had raw strength, all of those, never been better. And we know he is one of the great, true, full-rounded, complete athletes that we've seen. Mike, also very big. Mike's biggest strength has always been, and again, we'll use the term gas tank. What does that mean? Is it pure endurance, like Nick Diaz? Is it, how hot you can burn, like Tyron Woodley? Actually, I have a breakdown that I did on Michael Bisping and his energy systems. And energy systems are how there's 3 primary energy systems that are expressed during any athletic expression. And we call it cardio, but it's a complex spiderweb of 3 energy systems. There's a breakdown I have. If you Google Michael Bisping and you put in Nick Diaz, maybe Robin Black, you'll be able to see it. And we looked in detail. So he would be closer to, say, a middle distance runner, an 800-meter runner, a 1,600-meter runner, something like that. 1632, that kind of thing. So he has the ability to sprint, but then he doesn't need to fully recover like Tyron Woodley, and that's not a criticism. I'm a huge Tyron Woodley fan. But to be able to burn as hot as Woodley burns, he needs to recover. That's the nature of that type of physical expression. Whereas Nick Diaz or Nate Diaz, you see those guys, when you hear the term volume punching, I'm pretty sure that one came from Jimmy Smith about 8 years ago. Maybe even 10. Jimmy Smith's been using that concept for some time. Maybe it came from Joe and Jimmy saw it. It just means you throw a lot of punches in a short period of time, a little more punches than others. They are able to do that because they have a pure aerobic capacity. They run marathons, so they can do that. Mike is not a marathon runner nor a sprinter. Mike is able to go hard, burn hot, recover while still active for 25 minutes. So is George. But Mike will be George is able to make guys start to fade. They'll make them start to fade in one way or the other. Nick Diaz never fatigued or got tired in the normal way, but he wouldn't have felt as physically strong later. Other guys, I'm trying to think of an example. Matt Hughes. Matt Hughes would have actually slowed down later in a fight because of the nature of his body and the way he expresses energy and effort. What's that? Yeah, a Matt Brown type, whereas Mike Bisping they're still humans, he is neither likely to slow down in his speed nor lose strength and power and expression. Mike Bisping will be the only person Carlos Condit was able to just fucking keep it up. But you'll hear, if you go back and you listen in between or even during rounds when George St-Pierre is fighting Carlos Condit, and I asked for us about this in the last year or so, he's yelling, red line, red line, red line. And I said, for us, were you asking George to push into the red, like push it down and fatigue the engine? It's like, no, I'm asking him to redline Condit. Very interesting difference. Push Condit as far as he can be pushed. And Condit, the shape that guy's been in his whole career, I can't wait to see fucking Carlos Condit back too. Before I leave for New York, we'll try to get in some Carlos Condit fight, early preview, Cub Swanson, early preview, a lot of great fights coming up in November and December. We'll get into those. But to be able to redline Condit and have him start to have stress to the engine because of how much you push him, not many, if any, could do that to Condit. And there's no guarantee that succeeded, but it was a belief and it was how they pushed him. They could try that with Bisping, and maybe they will, because George is an even smoother operating machine than he was in the past, but it will be very difficult to get Bisping to either slow down or become physically less able to express himself. So all of these things are at play. And why does that matter? George has not fucking fought in 4 years. And we say that. And again, I'm not trying to be critical. I'm trying my best to figure out where we're limited, and language is one of our limits. And had an interesting conversation the other day about somebody said they just read the book 1984. And if you've never read it, please read it. It talks about, I mean, a lot of you know, but it talks about sort of controlling the population. And there are little sub-stories about, using news speak to limit the amount of thinking that happens. And if you can limit the amount of words that are used, you limit the amount of thought possible. So when we say, is he going to have ring rust? Is he going to, or it's new, is it octagon shock? Every single fighter is different. Ring rust, octagon shock, these are very limiting concepts. Oh, he did? Oh, shit, okay, there you go, he had octagon shock. Or, did Kevin Lee, was he affected by the weight cut? They're all so different. Yes, these are not yes and no questions and answers. So all of those things, to really dig into this fight and really see it for the beauty that it is, you need to take all those things into account. But so anyways, what I was saying, 4 years off. Oh, is he going to have ring rust? If we say yes or no to that, we've stopped the conversation. If we explore what this really means, George, the difference, and I'm exploring here. I'm doing my best. If you're listening on iTunes or SoundCloud, I'm waving my hands around to simulate exploring. I'm exploring here, figuring out where we're going with this. The difference, what has George done in the last 4 years? He's sparred, had hard sparring rounds. He's been in there. This is different. It really is. He knows that. He knows it's different, but he can't remember, not truly, what it is to be in a full contact, full danger, full expression, full energy, full impact, full everything fight. He can't remember it. He remembers it's exciting, he remembers it's scary, he remembers once he gets into minute 2 or minute 3, his comfort gets better, he remembers it's hard in the late minutes of round 3 and 4, but he can't really connect to that. And if you've never fought, you can't either. And I've only fought at the lowest level, so I can't connect beyond the lowest levels. We're missing information. So will George have ring rust? I feel like we do ourselves a disservice by asking that question and waiting for a yes or a no. Things are different. It's different. He's a different man in a different environment, in a different time, with different meaning to this fight. So all of that will affect him. Then we go to the basics. Who's a better wrestler? Well, I've seen George in the room. George never wrestled better. You go look at and Mike actually touched on this interesting. He says, something about the first effort. On the first, the double leg, the first effort. I don't know if I agree, but then again, remember, what these guys say is not always the truth. They're sometimes trying to plant seeds in the mind of the other. Don't believe what they say ever. Assume that there's some other reason they're saying it. But Mike talked about how George, gets that first effort. When I see George in the wrestling room against the highest level of wrestlers that Canada has to offer, and these are killer wrestlers, the best I've ever seen in a room. I know there are other countries that have an even higher caliber, but these are high wrestlers. And George switches to a second and a third and a fourth and a fifth. And he fucking takes guys down. And that's hard. You know why you don't see as much commitment to the open field, double leg and the single and stuff as you used to? Because it's hard. Guys know how to stop you, but they stop you once or they stop you twice. And then people start to commit to effort 3 and effort 4 different. Not George. So can George take down the bigger Michael Bisping? I've seen him take down bigger men that are better wrestlers. I know they're not punching and kicking him, but I have seen him do it. Full, going full live against better wrestlers, not dealing with that other stuff, and do it. But it's even worse to try to truly weigh that fight. When you've seen all this from George, you watch it and like, holy fuck, I can't believe he's taking these guys down. Oh my God, I can't believe how fast he is. Holy shit, I can't believe how different he's fighting in the open field. I sat there next to Freddie Roach as George was fighting, and Freddie giving me insights into what George is doing different. And then I watched Freddie work with, oh my God, fuck, is he on? And then people would say, well, you've seen George. Is he going to win? You know what I haven't seen? Fucking Michael Bisping. I haven't seen a fucking thing. See a little bit of Perillo putting up some mic hitting stuff, but even that, don't believe that. They chose to put that out. That's not some accident. Somebody was in the room and like, oh, is Mike working? Let's see what he's doing. They chose to put it up. I'm trying to find as many different interesting things to talk about here outside of George is a better wrestler, but Mike's a great striker. George is a better athlete, but Michael Bisping, so hard to take down. Chael couldn't take him down. He took Chael down, et cetera, et cetera. We know that. We can get that. We know. We have those conversations on bar stools. We're trying to find other things that might be of interest. But I just lost my train of thought. So I don't know what that one was. I was thinking it was of interest, but yeah. So watching George. Oh yeah, Michael Bisping. I haven't seen any of that. I haven't seen fucking none of it except for what they choose to put up. This is what I was going to say. I can't tell you how many times, and some of you will find this interesting. I can't tell you how many times I've been in the room, either for stuff I'm doing, whether it was with Fight Network in the old days or TSN now, or stuff I've done for the UFC, or I've been there with fighters as prime time or countdown, or what's the other ones? Embedded. Fucking dozens. And this is what happens. They do the real work. Sometimes I'll get to see that. Sometimes they'll say, oh, there's people here who can't do the real work. And then they'll go, when are you guys shooting let us know when you're shooting for Embedded, or let us know when you're shooting for TSN or whatever. And then, okay, we're going to shoot for TSN. Okay, cool. Let's do that combo we worked on for TSN. Let's do that combo that we put together for Embedded. It's not real. None of it's real unless they want it to be real. So if if Dwayne is in there and TJ's fighting, a Sun Sao, and Dwayne's like, you have evolved, and I'm making this up. This is not something Dwayne, I'm using it as a potential example. This is not something I heard. And Dwayne looks over and goes, dude, you're just so much fucking better than this guy. And he and his coaches know it. Let's show him. The only reason Dwayne Ludwig, for example, says something in the gym all the time. We don't show any flaws unless we want to show flaws. In other words, if this hand is down, it's an invitation to you because I want that thing. And you really think when you see, and we see it all the time, we'll watch him bat it and go, oh man, his kicks don't look good. He's fucking showing you his bad kicks. Or he's making you believe that he's going to kick, or etc. It's all by design. These are all other layers to the game, and they all do it. All of them. They'd be insane not to. Or they'll call out, some of them will go even deeper. They'll call out combinations in words that they don't even use. It happens so much now that we can think what we want as an audience and as people writing about it or talking about it. But when the teams will see it, eventually they'll ignore it so much and disbelieve it so much that for a little while you'll be able to show them the truth because they'll think that's not real. Do you know what I mean? It's like fake news. You say fake news long enough and even real news people ignore, even though that's fucking real. It's the same thing. So, and it was funny, George said that, and at most of the time what you'll see when George and Mike are sitting on a stage together is George being boring, and I mean that with love, brother, if you're watching this. If you're watching this, go train. No, you don't need me to tell you that. You need a break every now. George, actually, one thing he has gotten better at is actually allowing his body to heal, is actually taking the time off to recover. It's something he's never been good at. He's good at it now. Which is why, he'll actually have a life to some degree, which is better for him and maybe why he's a little less stressed. But you'll see them sitting there, George choosing to not be bothered by the things Mike says. So Mike then figuring, God, I got to sell some fucking tickets to this fight and try to say stuff, and it just won't work. But then at one point he goes, George, I saw you with that point karate. And George laughed and goes, you saw the things that I chose to put up. Yeah, very great detective work. It's true. If it's there, they put it up. I asked if it was okay on my Instagram to have George and Freddie. And he said this round, and then they did just fucking jab, cross, hook. Because they wanted Mike to see it. Or whoever else. And this is 6 weeks ago now. They also wanted people to see how fucking big George was and how hard he threw his right hand. That's it. You're not going to learn anything there. I have the good fortune, and I'm very thankful for it, that when I don't have a camera, Joy or Swanson or some of these, Jorge, some of these guys, Wonder Boy, George, when I don't have a camera, they will show me these things, and they'll ask me or say, hey, we've been working on this, and that's a very great gift. Just a little sidebar of my own for a moment. Friends of mine fought last weekend, Zach Makovsky and Yanni Sherbatov. And Yanni's team, Yanni's a good friend. Zach is a very close friend. Yanni's team, Andy Poulis, who is a brother, said, could we hire you to break down Zach? We're going to pay you cash money. And I thought about it. I'm like, well, Zach is a friend, but he probably wouldn't mind. But then I realized, and I talked to Firas about it too, and he said, and he echoed this. I love being invited into these places. I love it. And on some occasions, some of these guys are kind enough to go, I don't have a lot of other nerds with some of the coaches and fighters. We don't have a lot of other nerds to talk about what else you've been playing around with. Or, hey, we've been doing this. What do you think? Or, hey, yeah, sure, of course, sit down. We're working on a new thing. That's a gift. That's like the greatest thrill in my life. And Firas and I were chatting. He's like, if anybody finds out that you ever took some of that you've got here in my gym, sitting in my gym, watching your friend Zach, and sold that to somebody else, you won't be invited into these anymore. I can't have that. That's the greatest gift of my life, other than my wife. After wife here, fucking pretty close, and she's the greatest. So I can't do that. So I don't. I said I had to say no, and they understood. Andy's still a brother, and Yanni's still a friend, and not only that, but Zach, who is a good friend and I admire greatly, I don't have to fuck with him. And more importantly, I made a good decision to never go in and give these things away. And to be honest, that's why there's a struggle here, because I know some stuff about George, and I don't know what I'm allowed to tell you. I can tell you. And they know that I do this. So when I'm invited in, they know there's a certain amount of this. But I also get asked, hey, this is off the record, or, don't talk about this. And I never have, and I never will. Because this job and this calling is an incredible pleasure for me. But the personal pleasure is to be able to, I'm still the biggest fan in the world, biggest fight fan, martial arts fan in the world. To be able to see it. So I don't know what I can tell you, the extras about George. I'll ask his coach and coaches this weekend before our next piece. I can tell you this. I sparred with him years ago. I didn't know how to fight back then, and I got better at it in between. But he dominated, obviously. Well, he's an elite athlete. I'm an old man who was a very mediocre or lower athlete. But he dominated me in terrifying ways. But also because I understand what's happening, I was able to see that this is a far, far, far more evolved when I grappled with him. Far more evolved George St-Pierre on the ground. Far more. Far fucking more. Way more. And I also got to fight with him. And let me tell you this. So not talking about George specifically. Why people say, oh, point karate, it's really good. Oh, it's great. It's good for your distance management. It's good for you really understand range, et cetera, et cetera. That's not it. Why is fucking point fighting great? What is it that would carry over? Oh, you're barely touching the guy. You're not going to hurt anybody if you train like that. Sure, that's all true. Where's the value? The value is when you are trying to touch me, not even with full commitment. It takes more effort to lean into something than it does to pop out and touch you. When you're doing that, freer than anybody, more fluid, faster, because you aren't trying to hurt. You are faster, you're more deceptive, you're giving away less tells, you move further, etc. You're doing that. And I get to a point that you can't touch me. How hard is it to touch me with a real punch or kick? Do you know what I'm saying? It's not the doing to you. It's this not allowing you to do to me that true point fighting does. And George has been working, as Mike said, this is why I can talk about it, because George put it out there for him to see. That's what George has been doing. And you start thinking about it. He's bigger. He's stronger. He thinks he can out wrestle Mike. He He's better in his grappling and his ability to dominate physically and on the ground than he's ever been. And he can't get hit until he's ready for that. If that's the combination he puts together, very challenging. And you know what Mike says? Mike don't give a fuck. Mike don't give no fuck at all about any of it. He shows up to fight. He's the ultimate game day guy. He's very fucking good at everything. He beat Anderson Silva and Dan Henderson. And he wants to go in and beat George St-Pierre. And that's exactly the right attitude to approach this with. And that's what George has to deal with. Mike doesn't give a fuck. Mike will try to physically intimidate George. He'll try to remind George on every occasion possible that he's bigger, presumably stronger, fearless, won't break, and will be fucking there right till the last of 25 minutes unless George can choke him out or somehow knock him out. And that's what George will have to deal with. And that, if you're Mike Bisping, what you're telling yourself and what you're trying to deal with as a reality is, I'm way more fucking man than this guy. And go and seek to prove that. And maybe we'll leave it there, but please hit me up anywhere. Instagram at Robin Black MMA. If you want to leave a message on my 1-minute breakdowns on Cowboy or Lobov, that'd be great. I'm also doing 1-minute breakdowns this week on Brunson versus Machida and Colby Covington. Colby Covington versus Damian Maia. So on any of those, if you leave me a question about what you'd like to dig into about this, science, mentality, technique, strategy, whatever. What's George St-Pierre? He's better than he's ever been. Is that enough in 2017 to beat the guy who fucking took out Luke Rockhold the way he did? A guy who's been there getting better, solidly better, mentally tougher, physically better, technically better, all the way through, the winningest fighter ever. People fucking don't give Michael Bisping his enough credit. It's bullshit. It's fucking bullshit. Is that enough? Might not be. We'll dig deeper. Thanks for hanging in. And if you hung to here, you're one of our committed ones, and we thank you. It's at Robin Black MMA on Instagram and on Twitter and on Periscope. And if you are so inclined, Patreon, patreon.com/Robin Black. There's people giving us some extra help and support to travel and pay for the studio and all those kinds of things. And we can't thank you enough. And if you're so inclined, thank you. And we'll be back more next week. There's going to be some David Mullins looking at this fight and other things. There's going to be more analysis into this, more analysis into Jorge Masvidal versus Stephen Thompson, and tons of other shit. All right. Thank you. Blackout.